Bolt fam, today has that something's shifting feel in LA. And it's not just one clean headline you can file away. There are 4 different storylines tugging in the same direction, and if you line them up the right way, you can actually see what this offseason is trying to do with the Chargers. First, Justin Herbert somehow ends up in the middle of a league-wide MVP argument without even getting the finalist treatment. Second, there's talk around a young, elite center that fits this roster almost too perfectly. Third, the ugly truth about last season's offensive line is getting dragged back into the light again. And yeah, it still stings. Fourth, there are contract decisions sitting right on the doorstep that can shape the identity of the defense for the next few years. Hang with me, because by the end, I'm going to connect all 4 into one clear picture. No fluff. But real quick, be honest. Do you trust this front office to hit the right switches when the pressure turns up? And if you're riding with the Chargers, do me a favor, tap like, hit subscribe, and let's talk through it. We've got to start with Herbert, because this one is strange, in the best way and the worst way. Justin Herbert wasn't one of the 5 MVP finalists at NFL Honors. And yet, he still got a first-place vote. 1 vote. That's it. And that single vote set the whole thing on fire, because the MVP race ended up so tight that people immediately argued it might have swung who actually won. All of a sudden it's, wait, what are we doing here? And how does someone outside the finalist list get a first-place vote? It turned into that kind of noise overnight. But for Chargers fans, the noise isn't the main point. The real point is what it says out loud. Herbert is getting placed in the same conversation as the guys everyone expects to run the league. And that matters, because respect in February has a funny way of turning into pressure in September. You feel it. The league feels it. And you can see that respect show up immediately in the early 2026 MVP odds. Herbert is tied for 3rd at plus 1,000, right there with Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, and Drake May. That's not some wish-it-into-existence moment. That's the market basically saying, there's a lane where this guy is right in the middle of it. The Chargers as a team also landed surprisingly strong early Super Bowl odds, around 9th best overall, 4th among AFC teams. So it's not just Herbert is good, it's this roster might be lined up for something real if the right pieces click. So why now? Why is Herbert suddenly sitting in this spot when he's been putting up numbers for years but hasn't been a true MVP factor? The timing is doing a lot of the talking. The Chargers brought in Mike McDaniel as offensive coordinator, and the early expectation is that Herbert can take another step in that system. McDaniel basically laid out the approach. Put Herbert in situations where he doesn't have to carry the entire operation every single week. Do more by doing less. In football terms, that's efficiency. Rhythm. Letting the scheme create answers so Herbert isn't constantly forced into hero ball. That's the kind of offense that can stack chunk plays without living in chaos. That's the kind of setup that turns 3rd and long into, okay, manageable, instead of, please don't get him killed back there. You know what I mean. But here comes the part we can't pretend away. None of that works if the offensive line is a roulette wheel. You don't build an MVP season on your quarterback getting hammered. You don't make a playoff run when your franchise guy is constantly bracing for contact before routes even have time to breathe. So let me put it right on you. Do you want Herbert to have a pretty season statistically? Or do you want the Chargers controlling games in December and showing up in January with the QB upright and the locker room feeling bulletproof? Because if McDaniel's plan is real, it's going to demand one thing over everything else: protection, stability, and a smarter structure up front. Which brings us to the next piece. Because there's one name being floated that doesn't even feel like smoke. It feels like straight up logic. Tyler Linderbaum. When you look at the Chargers cap situation heading into free agency, it almost dares you to dream. They're sitting on more than $80 million in projected cap space after the 2026 bump. Top 3 in the entire league. And the biggest hole on this roster? The interior of that offensive line, especially at center. That's the brain. That's the voice. That's the guy who keeps protection calls clean and keeps Herbert from getting popped before a play even has a chance. Meanwhile, Baltimore declined Linderbaum's 5th-year rookie option, even though he's one of the best young centers in football. That doesn't automatically mean he's gone. It doesn't mean Baltimore can't retain him. Nothing is confirmed yet. But it does open the door to the exact scenario Chargers fans have been begging for. A proven, high-level center with real NFL experience, potentially hitting a market where the Chargers actually have the money to win the fight. And Jonathan Jones from CBS Sports wrote that sources are already connecting Linderbaum to the Chargers as a top target if Baltimore can't keep him. That's why this feels different. This isn't just fans playing Madden and forcing a trade in their heads. This is one of those fits where the logic is loud. Harbaugh wants a tougher identity, McDaniel wants the offense to function without Herbert playing firefighter, and the fastest way to calm the entire operation down is to lock the middle of the line with a legit anchor. Think about what Linderbaum would mean here for a second. No, really, sit with it. He's 25, back-to-back Pro Bowler, strong grades at his position, a guy who can control a line the way Corey Linsley did when he arrived. Except you'd be getting him in his prime years. That changes what you can call in the red zone. It changes how comfortable Herbert is stepping up instead of fading. It changes what the run game looks like when you need 2 yards and everybody in the stadium knows exactly what's coming. And I already know what happens next in the comments. Don't pay a center top of market money. Draft one. I get it. I do. But here's the issue. Centers don't always hit immediately. NFL speed, protection calls, disguises. It's a different world down there. If you're rebuilding, sure, you can live with the learning curve. The Chargers aren't rebuilding. They're in window open mode. Herbert is in his prime. The coaching staff is installing an identity. You don't want to burn a year teaching the most important spot on the interior how to swim while your franchise QB is taking body shots. So yeah, if it means resetting the center market, you at least have to think about it. Because what's the alternative? Another year where Herbert has to live in survival mode? Another year where the offense can be explosive but still unstable? And if you've been wondering why the Chargers keep getting tied to Linderbaum so strongly, it's because last season's offensive line wasn't just not great. It was a problem that got loud, publicly, painfully, and repeatedly. Pro Football Focus had the Chargers' offensive line near the bottom of the league in 2025, with only a couple teams graded worse. And what makes that so wild is the Chargers still went 11-6 and made the playoffs. That's the definition of winning despite the trenches, not because of them. Remember the hope going into that year? The idea that the Chargers could roll out the best offensive tackle duo in the NFL? Then injuries hit. Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt both went down, and the whole thing collapsed. Protection calls got messy. The pocket got shallow. Herbert was dealing with pressure fast enough to erase timing before it even started, like, you're still halfway through your drop and it's already chaos. And then there's Mekhi Becton. He was brought in to help stabilize the interior, and he didn't meet expectations. His pressure rate allowed was brutal for a guard, worst among that position group by that metric. And the end result played out exactly like you'd fear. The Chargers allowed 60 sacks last season, Herbert got hit more than any other quarterback, and it all came to a head in the playoffs with him taking 6 sacks in that loss to the Patriots. Let me say this once, plain and simple. A franchise quarterback can survive chaos in short bursts. He can't build a Super Bowl run living inside it. That's why draft talk immediately points to the interior. Field Yates' early 2026 mock draft has the Chargers taking Penn State guard Olava Vega-Ioane at 22 overall. And whether you love mocks or you roll your eyes at them, the logic is consistent. Even if Slater and Alt come back healthy and instantly raise the floor, the middle still needs reinforcements. Period. Ioane is described as a rugged physical guard, a body mover in the run game, strong in pass pro, and he didn't allow a single sack over the past 2 seasons. That's the kind of prospect that screams, plug me in, let me play angry. Harbaugh football lives on that kind of physicality. And here's a quieter red flag from last season that you can't ignore. Herbert ran more than ever, career highs in rushing attempts and yards, and he was near the top of the team in both. People will say, cool, he's athletic. Sure, but a lot of that wasn't some master plan. It was escape. And that's not the version of Herbert you want showing up every Sunday if the goal is a deep playoff run. So the Chargers are staring at a real choice, and it's not either or. It can be both. Chase a top-tier veteran center and still draft a guard early. If Becton stays, you create competition. If he's cut, you open flexibility and urgency. Either way, the interior has to be treated like a priority, not a side quest. Now, with all of that on the table, here's the question that connects the whole thing. If the Chargers know the line was a disaster, why aren't they just throwing money everywhere right now? Because the next part of this offseason isn't about outsiders. It's about what you keep in-house and how you shape the future of this defense. Contract extensions are on the table, and the two names that jump right out are Derwin James and Tuli Tuipolo II. Start with Tuli, because emotionally this one feels pretty clean. He took a big leap in 2025. 13 sacks, 20 tackles for loss, 23 QB hits. Pro Bowl honors, all AFC recognition. That's not just a nice year. That's the kind of year that changes what offenses have to prepare for when they see you on the schedule. When you get that kind of production from a young pass rusher, you don't just shrug and hope it repeats. You start thinking about locking it in. But even then, it's not as simple as pay him. It's how does it fit with everything else? Because the Chargers also have to worry about trying to keep guys like Odafe Oweh and Khalil Mack, and those decisions can influence how aggressively you move on a Tuipolo II extension. You can delay big front-loaded payments. You can structure things to keep flexibility. They've got options. Finally, the good kind of options. Derwin is the complicated one. Not because he isn't a leader. Not because he hasn't been a core piece. It's the business side staring you in the face. He's heading toward 30, and he's carrying a $24.6 million cap hit in 2026. You can absolutely do an extension and make the numbers work. The Chargers have the space. But you also have to decide how much flexibility you want to keep, especially if a wait and